Hello again, my name is Strawberry Quartz, and welcome to my YouTube channel where I talk about whatever the fuck I want, because I don't care what the algorithm says. I think we as a society have moved past the need to pay attention to algorithms. I think they're dumb. But I'm just a stranger on the internet. Don't let me tell you what to think. Anyways, today I wanted to discuss The Green Knight and the Rise of Skywalker, and more importantly, how they both do this really stupid trope that I really don't like, and I think it's stupid, and I'm gonna tell you why I think it's stupid. And then, I don't know, tell you other things probably, because that's how essays work, I think. Anyways, so, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just a little guy on my first day. I'm just a little guy on my first day. You can't hate a little guy on his first day. Anyways, so, right, so, unlike last video, I decided to do a little bit of extra research, right? And so first, I took a, well, that's a lie. First, I rewatched The Green Knight, mostly as an excuse to stare at Dev Patel, but secondly, to make sure that I saw the movie right, because it'd been a while since I'd been hyperfixating on that movie. And so I decided to rewatch it just to make sure that I was right, because I remembered reading somewhere that in the original tale of Garwin and the Green Knight, that it ends different. That it does not end with getting his head chopped off, right? And so I wanted to rewatch the movie to make sure, like, I don't want to make this whole video where I'm talking about, man, isn't it stupid that Garwin gets his head chopped off at the end, and then, like, you go and watch the movie, and, like, he didn't get his head chopped off at the end, which, they leave it ambiguous. I don't, let me explain. In The Green Knight, the movie, by A24, the last shot of the movie is the Green Knight saying, "Off with your head," to Garwin. And then there is a sound of an axe, right? So you think that Garwin gets his head chopped off. That is going to be the personal assumption that I lead this rant with, because it's important to recognize that A24, who I don't think has done this in any of their other films, literally, after all of the credits have rolled, put this, like, 2-second scene of a girl playing with a crown, like the crown that, like, King Arthur wears. And so, like, there's this implication that, like, Garwin did go and change his life and, like, still become king afterwards, but they don't put that in the movie. For whatever reason. They were like, nah, that's a stupid thing. We don't need to do that. We don't need to put that in the movie. It's ridiculous. I don't understand why they did that. I don't understand. This isn't going to be a whole rant on why The Green Knight is ridiculous in regards to its source material, but I will say it could have been gayer, and that's like 90% of my issue with the movie. No, but seriously, like, it does weird things with the source material that I'm just very confused about, and I don't understand why they did it. Like, the main thing with the ending is that, like, at the very end, Garwin, like, goes to the Green Knight, like, in the book, right? I didn't want to do this rant, but I have to do this rant. It's important. Stick with me. So Garwin goes to the Green Knight, right? And he's like, "Hey, I'm sorry for chopping off your head, dude. I'm here to get my head chopped off." And the Green Knight's like, "Cool." And so he does the similar thing to the first movie, where he, like, flinches the first 2 times, and then the second time he's just like, he saves himself, he comes to terms with it, and then the Green Knight does a little boop. He just boop on the back of Garwin's neck, and he doesn't fully chop off his head. He just does a little nickaroo. And Garwin's like, "What the fuck, dude? I just went on this awful perilous journey to get here. am traumatized for life. I don't understand. Why didn't you cut off my neck? I thought that was the deal. I mean, obviously it's terrifying and I don't actually want you to cut off my neck, but like, I thought you were going to do that. So like, I'm very unclear, like, where are we at? Right? And so the Green Knight is just like, dude, I'm so sorry. I'm actually like, that hunter you saw, I'm him in disguise, except I'm also like a pagan deity probably, because your mom is Morgan Le Fay and she was trying to bait your Uncle Arthur, you know, King Arthur, the King of England. That Arthur, do you know of him? Yeah, you had Christmas with him. He was there when I was also, in this story, it's on New Year's Eve, on New Year's Day instead of Christmas. I don't know why they changed that to, why they changed it to Christmas. But anyways, in this story, it's like, yeah, like, you know how like you were hanging out with your uncle on Christmas and your mom couldn't be there. Yeah, well, the reason she couldn't be there was because she was using a coven of witches to like raise me from something. They were doing witchcraft. It doesn't matter. Don't get caught in semantics, dude. Anyways, they were trying to use me to like kill Arthur and like get you on the throne, and like that would be like a cool thing. But instead you chopped off my head, and that kind of threw a wrench in our plans. But like we couldn't like go back on the deal because like witchcraft. We had to like have you go on this like whole journey of self-reflection, I guess. Now that you're here, I can just reveal to you the truth that you weren't supposed to be involved in this mess. I'm sorry. Here's a story you can tell your uncle, I guess. Goodbye. And then, like, that's it. That's the end of the story. And so instead of, like, the movie, The Green Knight, using that ending, they're like, yeah, we're gonna have, like, a whole story where, like, Garwin realizes he's a piece of shit, and he has, like, a whole, like, Ebenezer Scrooge-ass vision about how much he's been fucking up his life and how his life will continue to go if he doesn't, like, maybe that's why they made it on Christmas, is they were like, oh man, this is just the fucking Christmas story with extra levels. We might as well just make it on Christmas, I guess. I don't know why filmmakers do what they do. I would love to be the kind of person who is like, does film things and understands why people do what they do, but instead I'm on YouTube and I'm making this video and you're watching it for some reason, so that's where we're at, okay? That's where we're at. Anyways, so so I don't know why the filmmakers decide to change the ending, but instead they imply that, like, Garwin has this, like, really intense vision that he's, like, a shitty person, and then when he finally realizes that he's a shitty person and he needs to change his ways, he gets killed. Do you understand why that ending bothers me? Like, let me walk it through to you one more time, because I don't think my timing was quite right, because I'm autistic, right? So Garwin, he's been going on this journey, right? He's been going on this journey where throughout the journey, he's getting tested on all the different, like, characteristics of being a knight. There are several, probably 5, because that's what they said at the beginning of the movie, but I don't actually know. I'm not a knight. I don't know how that works. But Garwin's getting tested on all these different things, like charity, generosity, virtuousness. I don't know. It's a whole thing. So, like he has a thing with the beggar dude where he's supposed to tip him generously, and he doesn't. He underpays him. And so he's like, oh man, off with your head, dude. And so he gets this, like, horse stolen and things. And then he has the thing where, like, he's supposed to be, like, selfless and help this, like, lady who got her head chopped off, which I recognized her actress from, like, from the Willow reboot. I need to talk about the Willow reboot at some point, because it is, I don't know why they made it, but it's really fun to talk about. Anyways, I'll talk about that another time. They talk about the Willow. They have that actress, and she's like, hey, can you get my head out of the water? It's really emotionally important to me as a ghost spirit dude person. And he's like, cool, can I get a reward? And she's like, why the fuck would you ask that? What kind of fucking knight are you? He's like, I'm not a knight. Me? Who's a knight? Me on my nightly quest? Me a knight? Not me. Sure, not me. And because he has Dev Patel's eyes, like, I let him get away with it the entire movie. Anyway, so he does that. And then he befriends a fox. I still don't understand the point of that, but he befriends a fox, and then he meets this hunter who's actually the Green Knight in disguise, and he's like, hey, the hunter dude, the guy who runs the house, he's like, hey, anything you get from this house, you have to give me. And then Garwin gets, like, a fucking hand job from the wife and a kiss, but then Garwin only gives the hunter a kiss. Maybe that's the point, is that he doesn't give the hunter everything he's supposed to give him. Maybe that's the point. I don't know. This movie is so fucking stupid. And then he meets up with the fox again, because the hunter was going to kill the fox, but then he doesn't kill the fox because Garwin realizes he's trapped in a magical time bullshit. I don't know. I've watched this movie several times and I still don't understand why they did what they did. Anyways, and then fucking, so Garwin, like, leaves, and the fox goes with him, and the fox is like, hey dude, don't go, you're gonna get your head chopped off. And he's like, no, I'm not. My mom gave me a fancy scarf. Fuck you. I don't need friends. And then he, like, sails off to the Green Knight, right? And he goes to the Green Knight, right? He goes to the Green Knight. And so far, we've had several examples that Garwin sucks. Garwin is not a good person. Garwin is kind of a piece of trash, right? We've gone through all the steps. We as an audience realize he's a piece of shit, right? And so Garwin has a dream. And in this dream, he runs away from the Green Knight, right? He's like, holy shit, I don't want to get my head cut off. That would make me feel, I don't like the idea of getting my head chopped off. That sounds like it sucks. So I'm gonna run away. I don't know, maybe that's also a knightly skill, is, like, not running away when your head's about to get chopped off. I don't know. I don't know. Anyways, and so he goes back, right? And he gets knighted, even though he failed all his knightly duties during his quest. And he becomes king, and also his girlfriend has a baby, but he doesn't marry her because she's, like, a peasant, and instead he, like, marries a child because he's a king and it's England. It's so stupid. And so he goes and becomes a king, and he makes stupid decisions, and he's a bad father, and he's just a piece of shit person. And then he thinks longingly about, man, I really wish I could have married my girlfriend who's a prostitute, but I can't because I'm king of England. And then, like, he gets in a war with probably France. I don't know. They don't make it clear. And so he gets in this war, and his family escapes, but he's just sitting there, and then they pull the sash. He has, like, a green sash that's, like, magically enchanted by his mom because she's a witch. I don't, it's probably supposed to represent something deep and symbolic, like his masculinity or his pride or some bullshit. I don't fucking know. The movie uses a lot of really fancy artsy language that I just cannot parse through. Apparently green is love, green is life. I don't know. So he's sitting there and he pulls off the sash and his head falls off. And he wakes up from this nightmare and he realizes he's a piece of shit. And he has this moment, which mirrors the beginning of the movie, where in the beginning of the movie, he's like, I'm not ready. I'm like 30 years old. I'm not ready to get a real career. And then he like has this moment where he like takes off the sash. It's very symbolic or whatever. And he tells the Green Knight, sir, I'm ready to get my head chopped off. And the Green Knight's like, cool, off with your head. And then that's the end of the movie. That's the end of the movie. Garwin realizes he's a piece of shit, and he gets his head chopped off. And I think for you to properly understand my rage, you need to understand my hatred for the Rise of Skywalker. If you've seen the movie, you probably hate it too, ideally. Otherwise, maybe my target audience does like Rise of Skywalker. You can like trash. That's okay. I'm not judging you. I just personally hate it for personal reasons. And the personal reason is that they go through a lot of work and coding and heavy lifting to greatly imply that Kylo Ren is like a fascist. He's like a neo-fascist. He's a neo-Yahtzee. I don't know if I can say that one word on YouTube. I can say fuck. I don't know if I can say that word. It's weird. Anyways, he's like a white supremacist or something. I don't know. It's a whole thing. He's like evil and he blows up planets, and they go out of their way to like make sure that we know that like the whole point is that this is supposed to be like, because like just how like Darth Vader was supposed to be Hitler, I guess, like Kylo Ren is supposed to be like new Hitler or something. It's a thing. They're trying to say something deep and political, but it's run by Disney, so like Disney at like the last second in the last movie was like, none of that stuff matters. And so they decide to instead give Kylo Ren a redemption arc where his dad dies, and because his dad dies, he like becomes a good guy or something. I don't understand. If you would like to help me comprehend why Disney would do something that stupid other than to like literally parallel the scene of Darth Vader's death, please let me know in the comments. I'll allow it. You can absolutely rage at me for being an incompetent Star Wars fan. That's allowed. That's okay. Anyways, so Kylo Ren is like a good person for 10 minutes of his shitty, miserable life, despite literally committing acts of terror, probably. He does that for 10 minutes. He kisses Rey because nice guys finish last or something. I don't know. And then he dies. Are you starting to notice a trend? Basically, what I've noticed with so these two, with the Jesus, what I've noticed with both of these movies is this idea that if you are a shitty person, especially a shitty man, I think that's important, and you just do like one good thing, you can like die a hero, I guess. And what makes, because we gotta go back to the Green Knight, obviously it has a lot to say, and it's not saying that much, but it does do something interesting, right? Because I wouldn't point out the fact that the Green Knight has an idiot plot if they didn't literally 30 minutes before the ending have a point where Garwin is talking to the hunter who in the story, like, that this is based on, is the Green Knight, and he says, oh, you think you can just do one honorable thing, and then that makes you honorable forever, blah, 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 blah. And that, just to have Garwin do the one honorable thing, which is honor the game that he's playing with the Green Knight and get his head chopped off, and then just he dies. And then he's, like, a good person, I guess. And it's so it's so ridiculous. I do not understand why they do this. Because that idea, right, that you can just do one big, huge, grand old thing and, like, die, and that makes you a good person, I think is a habit we really gotta back out of society, because it's setting up this really dangerous precedent where, like, somebody can just, like, commit terrible, awful things and then say, hey, Jesus Christ, be my Lord and Savior, even though I've murdered and stabbed and lied and probably all other horrible things, and then they can go to heaven, but, like, if you're gay or trans, like, you can't. You know that thing? That, like, legislators are really mad about? Yeah, that's a whole thing. Anyways, my point is, like, you can sit here and argue with me that, like, these are just two random movies. It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. But at the end of the day, art is made for a reason, and art is intended to have a message. And so if you have these two toxically masculine characters do shitty things and then get redeemed, because it's very heavily implied that they are redeemed by dying, that sets up a dangerous precedent, because it also does a similar thing to, if you've seen She-Ra, Princesses of Power. I know, two very different audiences I'm putting out here. However, if you're like me and you're autistic and you're on a Tumblr, then you're in the right place. Good. We're perfect audience. Great. But in She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, the DreamWorks animated version, we specifically have this thing where, like, the evil lady, it's been a while since I watched the show. Anyways, she's evil, and she was abusive to her two surrogate daughters, and then she does one good thing, and she dies, and her daughters feel complicated about it. But it's like, this is like a trope that continuously gets set up in these stories where these villains do awful, terrible, overarching, shitty things throughout their entire stories, and then they get to, like, be redeemed as if nothing happened. And I think we really need to combat that, because that gives people who are like, hey, I've been doing shitty things my entire life. What do I need to do to be a not shitty person, Mr. Media? And the media says, I don't know, die, I guess. They can just think that, like, well, okay, there's nothing else I can do. Like, that's a really weird and dangerous precedent that I just don't really like. And again, not every movie, like, obviously has to, like, have this big overarching morality thing, but, like, when you're in a medium where every single step and single thing that you do has, like, 50, 100,000 bajillion people behind every step, and every set part of that movie or media or whatever is very purposeful, you're setting a weird thing, because you're clearly doing this on purpose, and then you just don't care that you're doing it on purpose. And I think that's a really stupid thing to do. Furthermore, it brings me back to this personal idea. The reason why it particularly bothers me is because I have seen so many dude friends in my life who have, like, been, you know, like, fans of Star Wars, or fans of, like, D&D, and fans of, like, fantasy. I've, like, gotten into a similar mindset to these characters of being toxic and being like, oh, nice guys finish last, and women will only like me if I have money, and, like, getting into these really shitty, toxic mindsets, and then, like, the only person who will, like, talk them out of their, like, shitty, stupid mindsets is, fellow shitty people like Andrew Tate. And so we have this basically, like, outcast dude to, like, neo-Yahtzee timeline, and nobody is doing anything about it, and the media is starting to continue to perpetuate that. It's like, oh, well, that's just how it is, I guess. And don't get me wrong, I don't think you can just, like, decide one day to randomly be a good person, and then everybody owes you believing that you're a good person, right? Like, it's complicated. But if we don't give people an option to do better and to learn better, I think it's weird, right? And obviously, I'm white. I am speaking from a place of privilege, right? So I can personally understand how maybe you were raised Republican and you don't know how to Google things properly, and you don't know how to get your good sources, because you may not be the kind of person who knows, you know, that Fox News and CNN and, like, what's that free one? I don't know, NPR and NPR are going to have different opinions on something based on their political leanings and who's backing them. If you are not the kind of person who knows that, you're not going to get pulled out of that line until you are so deep in the propaganda that by the time you are old enough to even vaguely comprehend what you're doing, you're just gonna be completely hard-headed to the facts. And I would personally like it if we as a society stop letting men only be evil, right? Because I personally am a traumatized lesbian, traumatized sapphic, and I am arguably transmasc, transfemme, depends on who you ask, and that being me and what day it is. Gender is complicated. We don't have time to get into it. But my point is that I am seeing these really shitty, toxic ideals being built into men, and then these men are just blindly following them because they feel outcasted and shat on by society. And I just need us to do better and to give them an out and to give them a way to better themselves that isn't, I don't know, go die, I guess. Because, like, sure, I'm gonna be the last person to not the last person, that's the wrong phrasing. I absolutely agree that if a person is being hateful and stupid, they deserve to get clocked in the face. That is not the question here. I am not saying that if you are bigoted and you are shitty and you are hateful, that you deserve to just do those things, and that if you just be nice enough, maybe those people will stop, because that's not actually how change works, right? Sometimes you need to get slapped in the face to have character development. And even if you have that character development, like, you know, let's say you're on the other side of the punch and you realize you're being a shitty person and you're being bigoted, the person who slapped you, the person who you are being bigoted against, doesn't owe you an accepting your apology or letting you into the punk community, for example. You know, like, you don't get to just spout hateful language and then just, like, I'll be like, please forgive me, move on. You have to actually put in the effort to change. And this is why I'm talking about this idea of what it means to be a good person, right? Because being good, just like being kind, being anything that goes under an umbrella, is a choice. Just like being a shitty person is a choice. And I know you're going to sit there and you're being like, no, it's not a choice. I was bullied and I was this and I was that. That's great. It's still a choice. You have to, at some point, sit there, recognize and admit that you have chosen to be part of that cycle and to be part of that system. I'll give you an example. I used to be in the Baptist church. I used to have a really good friend who similarly fell down this pipeline. We played similar video games. The only real difference was that I was AFAB and I guess a different kind of introvert than he was. And as I got older, despite, you know, the bullying that I was having, I ended up continuing to choose to be a kind person, continuing to choose to wear my heart on my sleeve, despite the fact that that was literally what was getting me bullied. I continued to choose to be better. And that is not an easy thing to do. I am not saying that, like, if you get bullied and you know, succumb to that takes you under and pulls you under, that you are at fault for that. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. Obviously, this has nuance. But I do think that at a certain point in your life, you get to choose, am I going to continue to let shitty things high schoolers said to me dictate my future, or am I going to move forward? And unfortunately, a lot of people do not end up letting themselves face that question until it's too late. And it takes me back to this comedy sketch by Daniel Sauce that has really meant a lot to me and really changed my life. And in this specific sketch, he's talking about relationships, right? He's like, let's say, to shorten it, he's like, let's say you're in a really shitty relationship, you realize you're in a shitty relationship, you get to a point where you have to realize, do I let the last however many years of my life that I've been in the relationship with this person be a waste and walk away from this, or do I spend the rest of my life with this person? Because I do believe that fundamentally we all get that opportunity, and we do get that choice at some point to look ourselves in the mirror and recognize, do we want to change our lives? I genuinely, personally believe that anybody can change, and that anybody can at any point look in that mirror and decide to change. But if you are shown that mirror to your face over and over and over and over again, and every time you say no and you refuse to change, at that point you have chosen time and time and time again to be a shitty person, and that is on you. And at that point, nobody owes you redemption. Nobody owes you giving you the benefit of the doubt. It is one thing if you are a 15-year-old who's white and Christian and grows up in the fucking Midwest and has their entire life been surrounded by people who are similar to them or hateful or have certain beliefs, and you reflect those beliefs, versus if you are a 40-year-old and changing legislation to screw people over, right? There is a difference. And we need to start having this conversation with people and start opening up in a way for people to be more authentic as a society, so we're not constantly having this battle of, well, I didn't realize I was a shitty person until it was too late, and now I just have to take this to my grave. What if instead you realized you were a shitty person and you did something about it and you held yourself to that for the rest of your life, regardless of whether or not the people that you were hateful towards forgive you or not? If you spent the first 30 years of your life telling queer people to go burn in hell, and then you spend the next 40, however long you have, fighting for queer rights, reading queer literature, listening to the queer community, doing your best to be a queer ally and stand and amplify the voices of the queer community, the queer community does not owe you, their belief and trust immediately. If I know there's currently this idea that cancel culture, right, is this terrible, awful thing, and we need to stop canceling people over mistakes they made in their past. But I think what we are forgetting to understand is that the point of cancel culture is to hold people accountable. And that was always meant to be the point. It was originally meant to be this pioneer of an idea of, we have a way that we can tell and reach out to people who are doing shitty things, show them this mirror to their face and be like, hey, I'm holding you accountable, right? And in that way, they can decide whether or not to change. And sometimes you have Jenna Marble apologizing for a fish tank, and sometimes you have Colleen Ballinger with a ukulele. And at a certain point, you are not the victim just because you did something shitty and people are still holding you accountable for it. Even if you change, you still have to choose to show that you are doing better, to show that you have continued to grow and improve, right? I can't just make my introduction video saying I'm anti-racist and then later on not doing my research for a sponsorship, and then realized I partnered with a company that's actually really shitty, and then just pretend, oh, well, you can't hold me accountable, it doesn't mean anything, right? I can't hold myself to a certain value, act against that, and then expect you to still believe that I hold the original value that I said. And I think a lot of people are completely overstepping that and completely forgetting that that is supposed to be the point. And I just personally believe that despite the fact that life is complicated and then you die, you still, during your life, get to choose to be kind, right? We can have 1,000,005 philosophical debates about whether or not God is evil or good, depending on human morality, etc., etc., etc. We can have a million debates about what religion means from a philosophical point of view and whether or not it's good and blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, the point of all of this is that you get to decide the kind of society you live in. And if you want to live in a society that is no longer racist, you have to help put in the footwork to do that. You have to have hard conversations. My point is that this is me trying to do my best to hold the people around me accountable, to show to the people around me that you don't have to be a toxic masculine shitty person for the rest of your life. You can go to therapy, and I get that therapy is expensive and it is complicated and insurance sucks and the world sucks, but if it matters to you, you will find a way. And trust me, as a person who has ADHD, who has heard that as basically a microaggression my entire life, I used to hate that. I used to be really bitter. It used to make me so pissed off when people would say, if it mattered to you, you would do better. But what they meant, and more specifically what I mean, is that if being a better person than the people who raised you and the community you were raised around matters to you, then you will put in the effort. You will make the reminders. You will go out of your way. I am personally at the point where my social anxiety is particularly paralyzing, but I am still trying to go outside and listen to people who have different opinions than me. I'm not doing great at it, but I'm trying. All we can do as people is admit that we will make mistakes, and it is up to us to choose better. You can forgive yourself for not knowing better at the time. You can forgive yourself for doing things you're not proud of. But in choosing to forgive yourself, you must also give yourself the gift of trying again. You must also give yourself the gift of change. You must also give yourself the gift of doing better and being better. Because the difference between hurt people who hurt people and hurt people who heal people is that those who cause pain to others were once young, once had that pain given to them, and decided that if I'm going to be in pain, I'm going to put that pain out into the world, and I'm going to choose to do worse. That one day I will be in control and I will be the one causing pain, so I never have to feel that small, that vulnerable, that out of control ever again. And the difference between that and people who heal and people who try and people who do better is that they decide, I will never let anybody else in my life feel that small again. I will not let myself feel that small again, because I will instead choose to be vulnerable. I'll choose to learn. I will choose to maybe learn psychology so you understand why people do what they do. You will learn, this is why what my parents did when raising me wasn't effective. Here's how I'm going to do better. I will learn why people do what they do, and I will use that as a tool of compassion. I will use that as a tool of empathy. Whether or not I was born with empathy, I will choose to grow it and create it. I think it can be really easy as a society to blame others around us for molding us. To be so frustrated and angry at the world for being shitty. But I think there are only two solutions. One, get angrier. Do something about it. If you're going to sit here and complain that the world sucks, do something about it. Put that, when you have the money, put it towards causes that you believe in. Vote. For the love of God, burn down legislature. Rip the Supreme Court to shreds. Do something, but do not sit here idly. People who are in power use that power against us, knowing that we are too exhausted, too tuned out, going through too much to do something. I know several people who are going through several different stages of burnout, autistic burnout, work burnout, overwhelm with the absolute society this has gone into. I personally am at the point where I can barely watch the news, where I can barely keep up with what is going on because I need to convince myself to stay alive. Which leads us into part 2. Create the world you want to live in. Humans were meant to be community creatures. One of the first signs of human evolution was a healed leg. There was a person, a skeleton, obviously, that was discovered by archaeologists that had a healed fracture in their leg. That meant that the people around them kept them alive, gave them time to heal that wounded leg. That person did not have to suffer on their own and that they had community to support them. A lot of what is going on in the United States, and I personally believe the rest of the world, is that we are so incredibly disconnected that we see another person who is different from us and we write hate comments about them because we don't see that they are people at the end of the day. We don't see them as a real person, we see them as fictional. I can honestly admit that I didn't used to write hate comments, but I used to write real person fan fiction. I know, cringe alert, because it was so hard for me to see celebrities as people, as real human beings who are going through things. And obviously, I don't think billionaires deserve compassion, because there's no ethical way to become a billionaire, but I do think it's important that as the world becomes more social, as the world becomes more online, that we understand and recognize and do our best to see that the person on the other side of that camera, on the other side of that screen, is a person. And that we must do our best to form community and to change the world as we see fit. I still continue to believe that if people want the world to change, if we want a society that is better, that is kinder, that is more empathetic, we must as individuals decide it ourselves and start forming community. We must put in the effort to remain integrated with society. We cannot continue to isolate ourselves, and we cannot continue to act as though we have no responsibility over our lives. I genuinely believe that authenticity, at least for me, means being so loudly and proudly myself that it inspires community, that it inspires others to remember that humanity is not defined by the worst of us, but by the choices we make daily. Humanity doesn't have to be defined by war and hatred and homophobia and transphobia and using the words life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness to eradicate people's lives and to ruin people's lives, that we can instead change to make it better. That 9 people do not get to ruin our lives. I am still figuring out how to do this. I am still figuring out how to change the world in my own way and how to not let a small majority of people with outdated beliefs decide how I live my life and how to be better. I don't know I know that historically, canonically, that the world of Star Trek is created not through humanity choosing to stop tearing themselves apart, but through the aftermath of humanity ruining themselves and then a select person finally having the space and time to be able to create what was needed for humans to be integrated with interstellars, to be integrated with societies that did better and knew better, and recognize that humans were being lawless. But I don't think the only way to a socialist, anarchist, community-based world is through destruction. But I do know that if we use that destruction against people who are actually in power, people who are actually causing the problems instead of amongst ourselves, that is where the real change will come from. Your fight is not against queer people or feminists or everyday average Joe Republicans. It is against people like Ron DeSantis, like people on the Supreme Court who actually have power and are actually using it for harm. I know that's a really deep issue to get into on a video that was inspired just by the fact that I have a crush on a bunch of fictional characters. But I think that's kind of the beauty of humanity, right? That something as simple as a 2-hour movie can inspire you to remind the world that we are not alone. And that community is forged and created through individuals and not an algorithm. So, my videos will only continue to get longer and more rambly and more complicated from here. My hope and plan and ideal is that people stick around because they care about me as a person and because they want to form this community with me, and not because I create the same thing every day. I can't guarantee that every single video I make is going to be a video essay, but I do promise that I will try my best to make sure every video is authentically me and is never pandering to an algorithm. And that if I ever do that, that I will try to remind myself that the point of creation and the point of art is to inspire and create from a place of genuine passion and joy, and not for the sake of others. But also, if you guys would give me money, that would also be sick, because that would make it a lot easier to do that. I don't have any way for you to do that right now, but that is the plan in the future, is to monetize this. Because 2 things can be true. Anyways, I believe in you. You can do better. You can be better. And this video is here to serve as a reminder that being authentically you in this world will one day be celebrated, but you need to be the person to start the party. Much love. Strawberry Quartz.